I remember the exact moment everything fell apart, because I didn't see it coming. My name is Alexander Vale, heir to the Vale legacy, or so I thought. My father, Richard Vale, built his empire with the precision of a surgeon, meticulous, cold, and efficient. But even the sharpest men dull with age, and in those final years, he became a man of fewer questions and far too much trust. That trust was placed in Lorraine, his second wife, a woman with perfect posture, silk gloves, and a voice smooth enough to suffocate you without raising suspicion. She wasn't just my stepmother. She was the architect of my ruin. It started with whispers, subtle remarks about missing funds from my late grandmother's trust, discrepancies in asset transfers, unusual signatures. I had overseen those accounts with care, always honoring the woman who raised me when my mother died. But Lorraine began planting seeds, telling my father that I had a flair for risk, that perhaps grief had driven me toward unsanctioned decisions. My father didn't confront me. He didn't ask. He simply withdrew. The daily calls stopped. The tone of his email shifted. When I arrived at the family estate one morning to deliver updated portfolio statements, I was greeted not by him, but by two silent security guards who handed me an envelope and told me I was no longer welcome. The envelope was thin. A single letter, written not in my father's handwriting, but on his legal letterhead. It accused me of misappropriating nearly $4.3 million from the Vale Family Trust. It stated that an internal audit conducted under Lorraine's direction had uncovered evidence of my misconduct. Attached was a scanned confession with a forged signature in my name. It wasn't just exile. It was annihilation. I tried calling him, texting, emails. Nothing. My number was blocked. The family lawyer, once a close confidant, refused to speak to me. Within 72 hours, my name was scrubbed from all company records, my access revoked, my accounts frozen. I was erased. I remember standing outside the estate gates in the rain, my tailored suit soaked through, holding that letter like it was a corpse. I had no job now, no home, and no public reputation. Lorraine had made sure the family press release subtly implied my removal was due to private concerns. And in our world, that phrase meant one thing: scandal. Even friends I'd known for decades stopped returning calls. I was radioactive. I spent the next few weeks holed up in a one-bedroom sublet in a part of town I'd never been to before. I sold my watch, then my car. I ate once a day. I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking of my grandmother, how she'd taught me to balance a checkbook when I was 11, how she trusted me with her last wishes. And I kept hearing Lorraine's voice in my head, that sickeningly smooth tone, calling me darling at family dinners while she slipped the knife between my ribs. There was no courtroom battle, no public confrontation. Lorraine was too smart for that. She operated in shadows, turning my father's mind against me not through loud accusations, but through quiet manipulation. And that's what stung the most, not that she lied, but that he believed her, that he never looked me in the eye and asked. I should have broken. I should have faded away. But as I sat on that stained mattress, staring at the cracked ceiling, something inside me hardened. Not rage, something colder. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to confront Lorraine at a charity gala or send angry letters to my father. No. If she had chosen war, then I would honor it, but on my terms. She stole my family, my legacy, and my name. I was going to take something more valuable. Her power. And I was going to make sure she never saw it coming. The first lesson I learned in exile was this: survival is not about strength, it's about silence. And so, I disappeared. The man named Alexander Vale, the presumed thief, the disgraced heir, the footnote in the Vale family's PR-controlled narrative, was gone. In his place, I became Adrian Cross, a quiet man with a thin resume, no ties, and an almost obsessive appetite for financial law, corporate sabotage, and digital anonymity. It started with night shifts, loading docks, data entry, janitorial work. Every dollar I earned was invested into my education. I rented textbooks, stole internet from cafes, and audited online courses under fake emails. If Lorraine had built my destruction on illusion, I would rebuild my life on precision. 3 years passed. I never stayed in one place for long. I didn't date. I didn't drink. My vengeance wasn't a fire, it was an ice storm. Slow, methodical, and blinding. I earned certifications under Adrian's name: CPA, CFA, Series 7. I applied to boutique firms nobody cared about, working quietly in backrooms, spotting loopholes, tracking patterns. And when I saw my first opening, an undervalued asset tied to one of Vail Holdings' lesser-known subsidiaries, I moved. I didn't sign my name. I used shell corporations, silent partners, and legal proxies. The moment the ink dried, I sat alone in my one-room apartment, staring at the documents that proved it. I now owned 11% of a company under Lorraine's umbrella. It was intoxicating. From there, I scaled. I bought debt portfolios connected to Vail projects. I acquired voting shares in adjacent firms. I made myself indispensable to mid-tier clients who were sick of being ignored by people like Lorraine. My reputation as Adrian Cross grew. I was the fixer, the man who could restructure a failing portfolio or dismantle a hostile boardroom from within. I understood exactly how my family operated. Their weaknesses weren't in numbers or strategy, they were in ego. They never looked down long enough to notice who was building beneath them. By year 4, I controlled nearly 22% of assets linked to Lorraine's personal network. Still, she didn't know I existed. My face never appeared in press releases. I refused interviews. My wealth was quiet. My power was invisible. But I wasn't done. One rainy evening, much like the one when I'd first been exiled, I sat in my new office. High above the city, walls of glass, no personal photos, and reviewed a file that would become the knife I planned to drive into Lorraine's empire. It was a private report from a legal investigator I'd hired months earlier. It detailed Lorraine's off-the-books investments, her transfer of my father's personal accounts into private holdings overseas, and her quiet dissolution of the Vail family trust. There were emails carefully deleted but recoverable, proving that she'd fabricated the audit that destroyed me. There were calls to my father's doctors, notes about mental competency, and a string of legal amendments he signed while heavily sedated. My stepmother hadn't just stolen my life. She'd stolen my father's mind. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in silence, hands clasped, staring into the storm outside, and made my decision. It was no longer enough to dismantle her power. I wanted to leave her in ruin. Alone, exposed, and surrounded by the very people she'd fooled, watching them turn on her one by one. And so, the next stage began. I contacted a mergers consultant I'd mentored months ago. We arranged a meeting with a board member close to Lorraine, a man whose gambling debts made him useful. Through him, I began feeding false acquisition rumors, destabilizing her portfolio's value, and sowing doubt among her allies. I manipulated audits, restructured accounts, and slowly, without ever raising suspicion, created a vacuum beneath her feet. She didn't feel it yet, but she would. My name would be the last one she spoke before it all came crashing down. By the 5th year, I no longer walked into rooms as a man. They saw me as a ghost. I had built a network of influence so dense and interconnected, not even Lorraine could trace its origin. That was the point. My stepmother had taught me the power of deception. I taught myself the power of invisibility. The companies I now held partial or controlling interest in were hers in name only. Vail Holdings still dominated the city skyline, but its foundation had been hollowed out, brick by brick, quietly, methodically, by me. My next move required precision. Lorraine had spent the last year consolidating the family's voting shares, persuading my father, now barely lucid, to amend corporate bylaws. She believed she was untouchable. Her plan was clear: sell one of the oldest family assets, Vail Biomedical, to a foreign conglomerate. The buyout would make her richer than the company itself. But in doing so, she underestimated one critical truth. Legacy isn't measured in money. It's measured in control. I activated the trap. The board member I'd lured into my orbit, Bennett Caro, was my first domino. I gave him a simple task: leak information to Lorraine about a hostile acquisition threat. but subtly suggests that she could solidify her control by fast-tracking the Veil biomedical sale. Predictably, Lorraine panicked, but not outwardly. She was too proud for that. Instead, she expedited the deal, pushing it through at a private board session where 2 independent votes had already been bought by me. I had hidden behind shell firms, but every signature, every dotted line, every bank transfer led back to my strategy. She thought she was outmaneuvering a threat. She was dancing on my strings. Next, I targeted her allies. Over 6 weeks, I quietly bought out or bankrupted her closest supporters. One by one, their loyalty was severed either by greed or fear. The head of internal finance discovered her name attached to falsified reports. The VP of legal found himself under investigation for backdating contracts. I didn't need to plan anything. I simply unearthed what Lorraine had buried long ago and let the rot reveal itself. No press, no police yet. Just silence, just fear, just the beginning of isolation. Then I made my presence known, not to Lorraine, but to the board. Adrian Cross requested an informal appearance before Vail Holdings' executive committee. Just a courtesy, they were told. A man who now held interest in 3 of their top-tier subsidiaries wanted to align on future strategy. The meeting was polite, clinical, uneventful until I pulled out a list of newly acquired voting shares. My name wasn't on them, but my control was. The room shifted. Expressions hardened. Someone whispered, "This changes everything." I simply smiled. By the time Lorraine received word of my visit, the walls were already closing in. She summoned an emergency vote to reinforce her authority. But when she entered the boardroom that morning, she didn't see familiar faces. She saw silence. Empty chairs, absent votes, and Bennett, at the head of the table, reading a statement of recusal from her former allies. She erupted, of course, demanded answers, accused everyone of betrayal. But the board didn't need to answer her. I had rewritten the game. She still didn't know who I was. That was the beauty of it. Adrian Cross was just a name to her, a thorn in her side, a rival businessman who had maneuvered her into a checkmate. She didn't know that I had once slept in the dirt because of her lies. That the man she'd called darling as she destroyed my life was now quietly reclaiming every piece of it. And still, I wasn't finished. She had taken my name. I would make her speak it, one last time, before it ended. The invitation was handwritten, thick cream card stock sealed with the Vail family crest, exactly as it used to be. I had received thousands like it before, during the years when I was a sun, not a shadow. This one invited me to the Vail Centennial Gala, the crowning event of Lorraine's career, and a celebration of her visionary leadership in transforming the company's legacy. My name, of course, wasn't on the guest list. Not as Alexander Vail, not as Adrian Cross, but I would be there, all the same. The gala was held in the Grand Meridian Hotel, a gleaming monument of glass and steel overlooking the city skyline my family once ruled without question. Lorraine spared no expense. Elegant jazz, cascading chandeliers, champagne towers, and political figures scattered among financiers and legacy investors. It was meant to be a coronation. She wore a silver dress that shimmered like a blade, her diamond necklace sparkling beneath the floodlights. She greeted guests with air kisses and curled hands, posing beneath portraits of my grandfather, my father, and conspicuously none of me. I arrived 15 minutes after the keynote began. I didn't walk in through the front. I entered through the loading dock, a black suit, no name tag, a narrow briefcase in hand. Security didn't question me. Adrian Cross was listed under the Executive Strategic Guests column, buried behind 6 layers of holding companies. I passed unnoticed through corridors of whispered conversation until I reached the ballroom doors. Then I waited. On stage, Lorraine was radiant. A speaker introduced her with scripted praise. How she salvaged the company after a difficult period. How she became a beacon of resilience. She stepped to the microphone with that familiar, polished smile. She began talking about the Vail name, about integrity, about family. And that's when the lights dimmed. Not all of them. Just enough to hush the room. The projection screens, once filled with her career highlights, blinked black. Then, slowly, a video began. No music, just silence, followed by a grainy image, a bank statement. Then another. Then emails. Then wire transfers. Then Lorraine's voice, recorded, directing a legal assistant to finalize the trust dissolutions before my father's next sedative dose. A collective breath caught in the room. A man in the third row turned his head, eyes narrowing. Then, from the back of the ballroom, I stepped forward. I didn't rush. I walked. Every step deliberate. Every second stretching as the screens kept playing. Her falsified audit reports, her legal coercions, her manipulation of medical records. When she saw me, her mouth fell open. No words came out. "Good evening," I said, stopping 10 feet from the stage. "Some of you may remember me. I'm Alexander Vale." Gasps rippled. A woman dropped her glass. One of the board members began whispering furiously to the man beside him. Lorraine didn't move. She looked like a portrait hung too long. Perfect, unmoving, and finally obsolete. "I was framed," I continued, my voice steady, "by the woman who now calls herself the steward of this company. She faked an audit, destroyed legal records, and manipulated my father during the final years of his life to consolidate power." Someone shouted, "Is this real?" I nodded toward the screens. "You're looking at her signature on 5 separate felony-grade fraud documents. Verified. Recorded. Backed up in 3 countries. Shall I keep going?" Lorraine finally found her voice. "Security," she hissed. "Remove him." But no one moved, because they weren't looking at me anymore. They were looking at the screens. One last image appeared, my father's medical record, stamped and signed by an independent evaluator, dated 1 week before he signed away control of the company. The diagnosis: severe cognitive decline, legally unfit to manage his own affairs. The stage lights came up. At the side of the room, the doors opened, and my father, frail, quiet, eyes clouded with age, was wheeled in by a nurse. He looked small, shrunken, but when he saw me, something flickered. A trace of memory, a blink of recognition. He whispered, "Alex." I walked to him, kneeled beside the chair, and placed my hand over his. "I'm here," I said. Lorraine backed away from the stage, clutching the microphone stand like it could save her. But there was no sound now, just silence, thick and total. The empire she built was collapsing, not with flames, but with the truth. The fallout began before the applause ended. Not for me. There was no clapping. Just a silent, collective exhale as people realized what they had seen was real. Lorraine stood frozen at the edge of the stage, her face pale, lips tight, eyes darting to every side of the ballroom like a trapped animal. She understood what had happened, but she hadn't yet accepted it. That came minutes later, when 2 plainclothes officers entered through the side hallway and approached her without hesitation. "This is a formal arrest under charges of elder abuse, trust fraud, and criminal conspiracy," one of them said. Her mouth opened, a whisper. "Richard, say something." But my father, slouched and distant in his wheelchair, only looked at her blankly, his memory too far gone to serve her now. The crowd stepped back, and Lorraine was escorted out of the room with the eyes of 100 witnesses pressed against her skin. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. Her dignity cracked not with a scene, but with silence. That was my design. I didn't speak again that night. There was nothing left to say. Within days, media outlets tore through the scandal like wolves. Matriarch of empire accused of family fraud. Stepmother's empire built on lies. Executives scrambled to distance themselves. Shareholders demanded investigations. But by then, I had already prepared the final piece, a petition to reinstate my legal identity within the company, supported by the very same board who once ignored me. They didn't vote out of remorse. They voted out of survival. Within 2 weeks, Lorraine was indicted. The evidence I had delivered, digital logs, voice recordings, financial documents, was damning. My legal team buried her beneath mountains of detail. She wasn't just accused. She was dismantled. I assumed full control of Vale Holdings under emergency authority, not as a triumphant son, but as a cold executor of restoration. My first act wasn't to celebrate. It was to walk back into the house where everything had begun. The estate was empty now. Lorraine's staff had fled. The furniture was covered. The once lush garden outside had withered under neglect. I walked through those rooms like a ghost reclaiming its body. My childhood bedroom, stripped of photographs. The library where my grandmother once read to me, now dust-covered and hollow. I moved room by room until I found the small lockbox in my father's old study. It was still where I remembered. Inside were letters, handwritten, stamped, unopened. They were from my grandmother, all of them addressed to me. Lorraine had hidden them. I opened the first. It was dated 3 months before she died. Dear Alex, if you're reading this, it means I failed to protect you from what I feared. I've seen Lorraine for what she truly is, and I worry your father is too tired to see it too. You are the best part of this family. Please know that. There were 6 more letters, all of them filled with love, with fear, with warnings. Proof not of betrayal, but of loyalty that never had a chance to reach me. I didn't cry. I couldn't. That version of me, the boy who believed in fairness, in truth, and family, died the day I was cast out. As I stood in the empty house, the weight of everything I had done settled over me. I had reclaimed my name, my legacy, my father's company. I had brought my stepmother to her knees in full view of the world. It should have felt like victory. But revenge doesn't give you back what you lost. It just makes sure no one else keeps it either. I walked to the mirror in the front hall, tall, antique, ornate. The same mirror Lorraine once used to check her lipstick before our family dinners. I stared at myself. My face had changed. Thinner, colder, older. Not in years. In resolve. I wasn't the man she destroyed. I was the man who buried her. And I'd do it again. Without hesitation. Without mercy. Because I didn't just take everything from her. I became everything she feared. If you felt that twist hit deep, imagine what's coming next. Hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell so you never miss a story of betrayal, revenge, and powerful redemption. One click, your front row seat to the next downfall.